Hello and welcome students. Welcome to the lecture of GRP, Good Regulatory Practices. We are discussing about good automated laboratory practices. So today I am going to discuss relates with the availability of instruction manual during the development process. Whatever documentation is necessary for the development of software, it should be prepared before the actual development process starts. Further, the subpoint says that documentation recorded prior to software development. So as I said just now, that the entire documentation part should be completed before the actual development process starts. So there is no ambiguity. The second point says process appropriate. This means that the person who is developing software of LIMS must select appropriate processes. These processes are approved by quality assurance unit and regulatory agencies. So process includes all critical steps like requirements, documentation. So there must be a document which lists out all kind of requirements in advance. So the person who is responsible for the development of software must collect all necessary requirements before the development process starts. Design documentation, it contains the software design so that there is no confusion related to the final design of the software. Coding documentation, so as you must be knowing that softwares are made up of codes, various computer codes. So codings are also very important part of software development process. So proper coding should be adopted by the person who is responsible for the development of LIMS software. Next is testing document. Once the coding is done, now we have to backtest the prepared software. So what would be the procedure for the testing of this newly prepared software? So it should be documented properly. And the last point says maintenance of document. There must be a proper way to maintain the above documents. Either you can store them in physical form or you can store them in soft copy form, but for that proper guideline should be followed, and whatever documentation you are generating throughout the development process has to be maintained properly. Then process is interactive. Process is followed. We must so ensure, we means the quality assurance unit or the laboratory management, so they must ensure that each and every steps are followed properly. There should be no deviation from the standard operating procedures given by either regulatory agencies or by quality assurance units. Next point is about requirements. So an acceptable requirement step includes elements of documentation of design. As I said earlier, that before developing any particular software, we must design that how it should look and what should be the working function of that particular LIMS software. So that clarity should be done before we start developing the LIMS software. So the document pertaining to all aspects of software design should be available. Then the documentation should be clear. So again, there will be no ambiguity regarding any step or any instruction written in this particular document, and the document should be available properly before the development process starts. Changes subsequent to design should be controlled. So once the design is approved, once the software design is approved by either laboratory management or quality assurance unit, if there is a need for making any change in instruction manual, proper authorization should be needed, and whatever change you are making, it should be documented properly. Change communicated as appropriate. So as I said, authorization should be taken from laboratory management and quality assurance unit. There must be a clear communication between the person who is authorized to change this document, and he must ensure that particular change is essential in order to improve the overall quality of LIMS software. Change approved by management representative. So once you justify the need of change in priorly approved document, the laboratory management representative will authorize you to make suitable change in standard operating procedures or the design manual of LIMS software. Next point says change archive for future references. So whatever change you are making in this design document, it should be archived properly so that in future we can take reference from that particular point, that what was the need for making such change in priorly approved document. Record is maintained for future reference. So whenever there is an audit from external agency, we are supposed to produce this kind of documents that we made certain changes in approved standard operating procedures. Requirements have been reviewed by appropriate management representatives. So whatever requirement we have put forward laboratory management, so the laboratory management would appoint a particular person as their representative, and he will examine, he will try to justify the requirements put forward by us, and he is empowered from management, laboratory management, to take appropriate decision in terms of procuring our requirements. Next is about design. So an acceptable design steps includes the elements of, so this particular part would remain same in every guideline, that documentation design, documentation available, documentation clear, and documentation timely available. Documentation recorded prior to software coding. So changes subsequent to coding should be controlled. So what they are suggesting here is that whatever changes are needed in the approved document, it should be done prior to starting software coding. Once the coding of software starts, then it becomes very difficult or nearly impossible to bring any change in finally approved document. So whatever document you want to carry out, whatever changes you want to carry out in the given document, so it should be done prior to software coding. Change communicated as appropriate. So each and every laboratory should develop a communication channel to communicate the need of such changes in approved documents, and the person who is seeking for these changes must follow a proper communication channel in order to incorporate these changes in approved standard operating procedure. Change approved by management representative. Once the changes are approved by management representative, we can incorporate them into our final standard operating procedure. Change archive for future references. So again you will see similar kind of points here, that whatever changes we are making, it should be archived properly. Records are supposed to maintain properly for future references. Design has been reviewed by appropriate management representative. So prior to software coding, after making suitable changes, the design of the software would be approved by management representative, and then only we can start coding the software. Coder instruction. Now what kind of instructions we are supposed to give to the person who is going to do the coding of software? So again, similar points, that documentation available, documentation clear and timely availability of documentation recorded prior to software coding, so changes subsequent to coding should be controlled. So we must give instruction to the coder that this kind of changes we have made in the prior document. There should be a clear communication between the laboratory management and the coder about the changes being made in priorly approved document. Change approved by management representative. Whatever changes have been made in the document, it should be approved by management representative. Proper archival of documentation, and documents should be maintained properly for the future references. Code instruction have been reviewed by appropriate management representative. Now please try to remember that laboratory management may not be an expert of computer software coding. So what they will do, they will hire some external agency, or they will employ some software expert in order to review the codes generated to prepare software for LIMS. So an external representative authorized by laboratory management would examine the final coding document and he will give approval. Prototyping instructions are included where appropriate. Sometimes what happens that prior to finalizing software, there is a procedure to prepare some working model, or there is a procedure to prepare prototype of actual software. So this prototype would help us to understand, to know advantages and disadvantages of the software which we are supposed to prepare. So sometimes prototyping instructions are also given to the coder that we need this kind of software prototype before final development of LIMS software. All instructions are sufficiently clear and specific to provide guidance at a level appropriate to the training and experience of the trainers involved. Now this particular point suggests that the coder must be an experienced person, but suppose you are not finding a person with appropriate experience, then there is a need to provide training to develop LIMS software, to create codes for LIMS software, and during this training period there should be clear instructions. Communication should be very clear about the need and the requirement of laboratory management pertaining to the laboratory management information system software. So communication is very important part. There should not be any ambiguity about the communication between the laboratory management and the coder. Change control. So in previous lecture we had discussed that if you want to make change in approved standard operating procedure, then there is a step-by-step process called change control that we have to follow. Each and every step we have to document properly, and prior to make any changes we have to justify that what is the need of this particular change. And once you have authorization from the laboratory management, then only you are supposed to make any change in priorly approved document. So documentation recorded whatever change you are making, whatever procedure you are following to incorporate that change, that entire procedure should be documented properly. Documentation should be complete before making final change. Change communicated as appropriate. Whatever changes you are making in standard operating procedures, it should be communicated with people who are using that standard operating procedures. change approved by management representative. There must be an approval from laboratory management representative before incorporating any change into standard operating procedures. Whatever changes you are, it should be documented properly, and documents are archived and stored properly for the future references. Change control procedures have been reviewed and approved by appropriate management representative. Now, there is a different set of procedure when you want to exercise this change control. There is different set of standard operating procedure. So here the laboratory management representative would ensure that the person who is bringing this change into priorly approved document is following proper procedures or not. A record of change request and action is available and archived. So first we have to place a request that there is a need to make certain change in standard operating procedure. We have to justify our request, and after getting proper permission from laboratory management, we can take certain action. But all these things we have to document properly, and this particular document should be archived so that in future during the audit process we can reproduce them. Then once we have the prototype or the final software, we have to carry out our own testing. So for that we have to prepare documents which mention approach specified. We have to develop our own testing strategy. We have to mention that what approach we are going to adopt for testing the newly coded or the newly prepared laboratory information management system software. Sample identification, we have to identify that what kind of sample data we are going to use in order to test the LIMS software. Clearly outline the methodology. So methodology we have to clearly define, and this entire methodology we have to document proper. Acceptance criteria, so mainly we are giving acceptance criteria, maximum and minimum criteria, out of which we are not going to accept the result. So this acceptance criteria we have to mention properly. Record is maintained for future references. For all above activities we have to maintain proper record, and that record we have to store properly for future references. And the final point says that testing procedures have been reviewed and approved by appropriate management representatives. So again, laboratory management representative plays very important role for approving this entire exercise, that is testing of LIMS software. So go through this slide and let me know if you have any query. Please remember that this checklist has been given by regulatory agencies, and agencies have given guidelines in order to maintain data integrity and data authenticity. And whatever discussion we had in this video, it was all about step-by-step instructions given to develop LIMS software. A good quality software will definitely help any laboratory management for better handling and processing of LIMS raw data. Please let me know if you have any query or question after watching this video. I will try to solve your query. Go through the website of US FDA and try to download these guidelines in the most authenticate manner. You may find many documents and materials pertaining to this guideline, but I would suggest you to follow an authentic document for the reference purpose. Thank you very much.